Oh, right. It's lovely to have you all here. Elizabeth looks like she's out walking, which is the wonders of modern technology. Gretchen, I'm guessing, looking like it's daylight. You are over in America.
I am Washington State, and it's going to be noon in half an hour. So I don't know what to do about my video. If any of you have any suggestions, I'm open.
Sheila,
a lovely day here.
Yeah, Sheila's definitely in the UK. Martine, you're in the UK, yeah. And Terry, you're UK as well, aren't you?
Yeah, West Sussex.
Yeah. So we will make a start. So today's session, we thought we'd be nice to have a socially look at bits and pieces, was going to be on all the accessory bits and pieces to go with spinning, which kind of is quite timely really, because it's one of the things I always say to people, well, if somebody doesn't know what to get you for Christmas or for any other seasonal holiday, they're the sort of thing that are often about that kind of price point that somebody might want to buy for you, as opposed to a spinning wheel, which is big present. Whereas a Lazy Kate, maybe a Skein Winder, is starting to be more in the right sort of price scale. So we're going to do equipment, and then maybe the next one we might do fibre preparation tools, but that might not be till January because I've got quite a busy December coming up, along with, I suspect, lots of us who are making up for last year. So we're going to start with my favourite thing, which is Lazy Kates. Now, Lazy Kates are one of those bits of kit that I think should be the first thing that you spend money on once you've bought a spinning wheel, because lots of spinning wheels have technically built-in Lazy Kates that are a little better than bobbin storage, because the ones that are built in with your wheel, it means you've got no flexibility about where you put them. They're stuck sort of coming up past your knees or up past your feet, rather than being over to the side of you on the other side of the room to help spread out any twist. Or you can pick which side you put it on depending on which hand you hold at the back. So if I always have my right hand at the back when I'm plying, well, that means I want my Lazy Kate coming up my right hand side, not having to come up and down by my feet so that it's getting tangled up around my knees. So the simplest style of cheapest Lazy Kate is this one, which I suspect we've all seen variations on a theme. This one is actually, it's a block of solid oak at the bottom, and that's really nice because it makes it really heavy, so it's much less likely to tip over. And this style works well. The sort that I used for ages and ages. The only disadvantage is that there's no way of breaking the bobbins or slowing them down at all. But what is quite nice about it is that they can all feed off independently without having to rub past one another, compared to Crash Bang Wallop, this style, which is the one that Shacked sell, and I think a few other, Kromsky sell one that's similar, and that's very nice and stable. And it works really well for a 2-ply yarn, because that one and that one can spin without touching each other. But as soon as you put a 3-ply yarn on it, if you've got it down on the floor at a distance, what sometimes happens is this bobbin, the yarn ends up catching up with the one that's on the top of the arch. So it's the style this is the one that came with my Shack Matchless, and I never use it. But one thing it does have as an advantage over that style is that it does come with a brake band that you can put over the ends of the bobbins that rubs on them like the Lazy Kate. So it does provide a way of slowing down the speed that the yarn comes off the bobbins. And that can come in particularly useful when you're trying to chain ply and things, when you're wanting to pull off quite big lengths of yarn, and you then don't want the bobbin to just carry on spinning and you sort of got this pile of tangled mess sort of accumulating on the floor beside you. So having some way of breaking things is quite nice, but I don't enjoy using this style in particular. It's never a Kate that I reach for when I want one, but if it's the one that comes free with your wheel, it's better than no Lazy Kates. Which leads me on to finally the one that I like best, which I believe I have written about, which is the Louet one, which seems like an eye-wateringly large sum of money. I think at the moment in the UK it's £110 for, I can't quite work out how it's £110, but that's now the price that it apparently is. It wouldn't be hard to replicate if you had somebody who was handy. And this one's nice. So it sits on the floor like that. So you've got this angle here and the other end is just supported by that disc. And there's a knob here that if you release that, you can change the angle of these spikes, and you use that as the braking system. So when you have it very, very upright, the bobbin ends up being quite heavily braked because the bottom edge of the bobbin rubs against the felt pad that sits on here. And the further horizontal you put it, the more free flowing the yarn comes off the bobbins. The nice thing about this one is it fits the bobbins on every single wheel that I own, even the jumbo bobbins off the Hanson. So you can put the huge big bobbins on it, whereas ones like this one and that one, you can only put the standard size bobbins on them, so they're not useful for everything. And it will also, there's a fourth spike, because on the other side there are 4 holes, so you can use it to make a 4-ply yarn out of, not just a 3-ply. But it is now, in the UK anyway, it's now an awful lot of money for what is 3 bits of timber, 2 metal spikes, 7 felt pads and a screw thread. But I think that's one of the impacts of Brexit, and it's costing everything more to get everything over from Holland. But I love this Lazy Kate, and when I take it to workshops and other people use it in workshops, they go, wow, I thought I just couldn't chain ply, but now I can. And it somehow seems less tricky to pull the yarn off the bobbins compared to one that runs off a brake band. It seems much easier to just get that compromise between pulls off easily, so that particularly if you've got a fragile yarn, the yarn doesn't snap, but not so much break, but not, it breaks enough but not too much, and it's quite easy to get an adjustment for it. So yeah, this is my favorite Kate, that when anybody says what's the one you'd use, okay, this is the one that does everything, fits all the bobbins and breaks them beautifully for just the right amount. So yeah, has anybody else got any Lazy Kate feelings?
I
I've never seen that.
So I bought that Louet one, and I don't get on with it at all.
Oh, do you not?
No, and I was so disappointed. So maybe I'm not using it properly, because it was doing everything you've just said it doesn't do.
Yeah.
So it was breaking yarn. The break was too hard, and I kept putting it down and putting it up, and so in the end I got this one, which is just the Oxford 3-1.
Yeah.
With more little fishy wiry breaky thing, and I've been happier with this, but I'm unhappy that I can't use the Louet, because you recommended it and I thought, well, maybe it's me, it's probably user error, but
we all like different things, so it might also be the bobbins that you use it with. I mean, I do use it with a variety of bobbins. I use it with some ones, I use it with my shacked ones, I use it with the ones that go on my Spinrad wheel, which are pretty similar in shape to the shacked ones. People have used it in workshops and generally got on with it, but I can see how probably if you got do you have an Ashford?
No, so I've used it with the Woolmaker's Bliss bobbins.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I use it with that as well.
And then I've got some, they are the plastic molded bobbins from a company called Bar Creative. They make bobbins for every wheel. So I don't know. I really think it's user error. I really do think it's me. I haven't got that break bandy thing right. I like put it up, put it down.
So yeah, so usually to get less resistance, you want the ends of the bobbins to be not sitting with their weight touching these felt pads.
Yeah.
So to get less resistance, you lower the angle further down, which can sometimes, I think, doesn't seem intuitive.
Yeah, I think I've probably had it too horizontal, and
yeah, I almost sort of kind of start off with it as horizontal as I can, so that the bobbins are only just clearing the floor, and then just gradually raise it up to the point where it's just providing enough resistance. And if it's at that angle perfectly upright, they really are quite hard to pull the yarn off, because the bottoms of the bobbins sit against these felt pads, which really slows them down. So
I should try again.
Try again, but if not,
it's on now £115, because I was.
It's even more, but yes. But if not, sell it, because the chances are you'll be. If that's the price they are new, you'll be able to make back what you bought for it a while ago. So yeah, so that's Lazy Kate's, which is one of those tools. I think if a spinner doesn't own one, just buy yourself a Lazy Kate. But you can make them out of shoe boxes and knitting needles, but they're kind of not quite as nice. And if you've got pets, they tend to end up being rather like something that Nelly likes cardboard boxes, so I can predict exactly how long a shoebox Lazy Kate would last in this house. So yeah, and I think, so have you got cats, Martine?
No, I've got a spaniel.
Yeah, so probably similar a box. It must be for me. So that's Lazy Kate's. There's a few. I'd say that seeing that Ashford one is nice, because I do see them and use them in workshops, because they tend to be quite popular in workshops, because they break down into not very much space. So, and they do work quite nicely, but I find it fiddly putting the break bands on. Might just it's what that you've got to be probably more patient than I am.
No,
because that's
I've got one of those art ones.
Yeah.
Father Christmas brought it last year. But I have to say, chain plying, I can't chain ply without it. Because if I can't slow it, like you say, I ended up with this big puddle. I tend to over twist anyway, and I just ended up with this knotted puddle.
For chain plying, having a Lazy Kate that you can put some resistance on. One thing you can do if you end up doing it off a shoebox, and this I think came a tip via Sarah Anderson, was that you can stuff some carrier bags in the bottom of a shoebox, and that just slows down the rotation enough that you can just have more carrier bags to add more resistance. So, but probably not useful for anybody here, but might be useful for anybody who comes back to watch the recording. So let's talk Skein Winders, talking about putting break bands on things, because this also has a break band that I never use because I am too lazy to put it on in place. I might need to go backwards with the camera. Let's try that. That's a bit better. It's nearly all in. So this is my Skein Winder, which I love to pieces, and I am so glad that I bought pre-Brexit, because it had to come over from Germany. It is so much better than any of the ones that I've seen being made by Louet, by Major Craft, by Ashford. It's a really, really sturdy piece of kit. So it's plywood on the bottom with little rubber feet, so that you can move it about but not worry about it scratching the floor. Reveals how dirty the state of my floor is. It's got, technically, this is a Lazy Kate that's on the bottom of it that you can use, so you can just have one, because it does have, via this peg here, a break band that you can put on, but you put the bobbin onto one of those spikes. There's a really hefty yarn guide at the bottom. That's what that O-ring is there, and that makes sure that the yarn wrapping around the arms gets guided onto the base bit of the arms, rather than it accidentally slipping too far off. Because I have had a Skein Winder once that I ended up using that didn't have a yarn guide on, and if you didn't pay attention, you ended up winding the skein right at the end of the arms. And then if you really didn't pay too much attention, the yarn ended up flinging off the end of the arms, and that was an absolute pain. So it has built-in yarn guide. You turn it via the central handle and it just winds on. And it also has built into it, get it so it's working, a built-in revolution counter, and it's a clicky jobby like that that you can then just reset. And that's really nice because it means you know exactly how many turns you've put into your skein, which then means that all you've got to do is measure the length of it once you've washed it, having jotted down how many turns you've done, and you instantly know what the yardage is in that skein. So the fact that it's got the built-in counter, the fact that it's so sturdy. The only thing that I've had to redo is one of these pegs just came fractionally loose. And I just had to put a blob of Gorilla Glue just to hold it in place, and that will be in part because it's quite often stored next to the fire in my house, plus then it sometimes gets hot and cold and hot and cold, and wood shrinks and contracts, so it's not 100% surprising that something that relies on quite a tight push fit needed a bit of assistance now and again. Before this one, I owned the Major Craft one, which was okay. It doesn't have a built-in counter. The arms didn't feel as sturdy on this one, and it just wasn't as nice a bit of kit as this. And then before that, I owned the Ashford one, which was really shonky, and I glued the pegs back into that one more times than I care to think about because they just kept falling out. It was an absolute pain. This one does make slightly adjustable skein sizes in that you can change, I can't do it now because I've got yarn wrapped on it, you can rechange that angle there. So by changing that angle there, this skein that I'd wound previously is now too slack. So that now means that it will be a slightly smaller skein, but basically I always wind a skein at that size. And then I use it as my swift when I'm winding yarn into balls as well. If I basically put the yarn back on here, usually I just need to reduce the diameter ever so slightly to get it to fit. Move the little knob so that the counter doesn't drive me nuts when I'm winding the yarn off into a ball. And it works as a skein winder as well because it's really nice and sturdy. But yeah, I had the Ashford one. It just kept falling to pieces on me, and it always felt rickety. The base, this upright, developed a wobble where it sat into the base because it's just held in place by a push peg, which is fine in that means you can take it to pieces again. But when you're going round and round and round, winding up 400 meters of yarn, the peg would just slowly work its way out, and you'd be then left with this upright post wobbling as you were winding away. So that's my skein winder, and I love it to bits.
What make is it, Katie?
It's by the same company who made my double wheel spinning wheel, which is Spinrad. And last time there was a German speaker on who corrected me about who my pronunciation was, and I think it was Walter Spinrad. Let me find the link and I will stick it into the chat box. But I don't know if he's still with Brexit. I don't know if he's still importing to the UK. Let me find Crazy Ella. Oh, I don't even know if I can manage to find the website. I know where I've got it. I've got it on my website. Yeah, so if you don't have a skein winder, a niddy noddy works just fine. It's what I used for years and years and years. Here we go. I was right remembering it. But the issue that you have with it is if you're spinning an awful lot of yarn, it can get quite tiring winding it on a niddy noddy, no matter almost what style of niddy noddy that you've got, because it doesn't matter how it's made. The basic principle is still that you've got to do lots of arm waving about. So I used to put off skeining. I used to leave bobbins of spun yarn just sat there because I was feeling too lazy to bother winding them into a skein. But this one's nice, and it does take up a little bit of floor space, but not too much. So yeah, the link's gone into the chat section. So yeah, you've got to be a bit German competent to order one, and you also can only pay via bank transfer. And I suspect now you will end up paying, if you're bringing one into the UK, you'll end up paying VAT and import duties as it arrives as well. If you're outside the UK, sort of like in the US, you've got quite generous import limits, so that wouldn't be too bad. But yeah, it's a really, I can't understand how Major Craft and Lewitt and Ashford are managing to produce something that is so far off this, because even the new Ashford one is still sort of just look at it and go, it's okay, rather than it's better. And the new Ashford one is now £184, and doesn't include a yarn counter.
I've got one of those like wiry plastic pop-up.
Yeah,
because it's a Skein Winder.
No,
that won't work, will it?
No, that'll only work to hold the skein. If you try and wind yarn onto it, because the yarn goes on under tension, it'll gradually collapse in on itself. So yeah, that only works as a swift rather than a skein winder.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, whereas a good skein winder will do both. So technically, if you've got a skein winder, you can usually manage to get it to do two lots, to do dual purpose. So yeah, it's one of those luxury bits of kit, but if you're doing a lot of spinning, it's a really nice.
The Swift was gifted from someone whose mother died and was a spinner, so
yeah.
It's probably comes from the 70s, I think, so it's ancient anyway.
It
works.
Yeah,
as a Swift.
My Swift that I've got, which I don't pull out because it's easier to get this wooden one out instead, is a genuine proper antique. If it's sort of 1930s, 1940s, which was fine until some of the really modern skeins, particularly of commercial spun yarn, have really, really huge circumferences. And the older skeins used to be made much, much smaller, and to just put it on, and it kind of just, even at full expansion, the skein goes on and then just goes, because it's just far too big. Like going, that's not going to work then. Somebody's going to have to sit and hold this, or I'm going to have to contort myself and wrap it around my legs to sit and wind it off. So yeah, so Lewitt make one that clamps onto a table or onto their wheel. It's really nothing fancy, but it's if you just want a real basic skein winder because you just can't manage a niddy noddy, it's probably the best of the lot. But yeah, that one is the Major Craft one I didn't really enjoy. In fact, I think last time I looked, the Major Craft one, they've stopped making the freestanding version. So by the looks of it, I think they probably recognised that it wasn't a great bit of kit and it maybe didn't sell that well. So, and I say Lewitt also make one, which is sturdy and basic enough, but having the counter is the thing that I really, really like.
I've got the eel counter on the way.
Have you?
Yeah. Oh, did you order one of those? Did you?
My husband got in on that one.
Oh, did he?
It's a gadget.
Yeah. It's that's the sort of good gadgety type things. The other thing I've used for measuring yarn that works surprisingly well is a fishing reel counter. And they're not that expensive. My big issue was finding somewhere to clamp it because I have no tables in my house. So finding somewhere where I could put it, because it's designed to clamp onto a fishing rod, so it sort of sits on like that and clamps in place. And basically, the yarn will fit on that orange pulley and not get itself wedged. This works, and this will measure in meters. And I measured backwards and forwards a few times with yarns where I knew the length, and it wasn't perfect, but it was close enough, given that you're generally looking at something and going, yeah, I've got a bit more than I generally need. I wouldn't trust it if you were being tight with yardage to within the meter. But yeah, so as that orange wheel turns, this moves and it will display the number of meters, and it's accurate enough. So that's a really, if you've not got a skein winder that will count, and you know you're not good at counting turns on your niddy noddy, what I used to do is have it set up between Swift and ball winder, so that as I was winding on the ball winder, it was running along turning this orange wheel. So it meant that I didn't actually have to worry about measuring the yardage at the skein stage. I just washed it and went, there's some yarn here, I'll worry about how much yardage there is as I wind it into balls. So as I wound it into a ball, I'd measure the actual meterage of each ball as it came off. What can be an issue with stretchy yarns is that if you're putting them under tension like that, you can end up with a slight overestimation. Hello, Nelly Belly. You come to say hello. Oh, it's okay. Come on. No, you're not going to say hello. No. 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 Shan't. Nelly Belly, come on. No. With all the contrariness of a collie. What are you doing? Oh, no, nothing interesting. All right, goodbye then. I'm not staying. When she was a puppy, she was a proper lockdown dog, in that the only people that she saw were her immediately family, and everybody else she saw on a computer screen. Yeah. So when I was having Zoom calls with friends and things, if she'd just be sitting on the floor with the dog sort of looking at them all going, hello. And doing the proper collie head tilt sort of. So bless her. Yeah, she's not happy because she had her tail shut in the kitchen door. So because she stood there like if everybody came through the door, and she just sort of stood there with kind of in the way and sort of went. But she's a Victorian melodrama queen. Our old dog Gwen, who died in January this year, she would be the sort of that would go, it's falling off, but it's fine. I can do it. I'm still walking. Just ignore this. It's just a flesh wound. And she walked halfway across a field with blood dripping from her paw in the snow before, and just going, nope, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Gwen, you're not fine. I am. We'll go for the walk. We'll go in.
I had a Labrador like that.
Yeah, whereas
and then I had a male one who had thorn or anything, a bit stuck.
Yeah, well, Nellie is the same. She got stung by a bee in the garden, and she basically took to her bed for the day. Just went to lay down in her basket and just like refused to move.
Oh, dear.
Do you want your dinner, Nellie? No. No.
Oh, bless her.
So, but yeah, she's proper little drama queen. Right, we have done turning yarn into skeins. We have done a thing that you can use even if you do not have anything posh for measuring the yardage of your yarn, which lends me on to the final, well, the other thing I was going to say was ball winders, which, given all the money that I have spent on very many other tools, because I'm of the opinion that this is my hobby, I am worthy of spending money on it if it's a good bit of kit. What is the ball winder that I have got? The Plastic Brother Jobby.
Mine's a Chinese knockoff of that.
Yeah, well, and I tried the shacked one, which is basically the same as the design as the Knit Pro one that sits flat on a table, and I hated it.
Oh, really?
I just
They work.
It worked, but I did struggle with, on anything that was the slightest bit slippy, it kept collapsing on itself. You had to be so precise with how much tension you held on it to get it to wind a proper cake of yarn that wasn't hadn't got sprawly bits around the edges. And I found the winding motion odd because it sits flat on a table. So you have to sort of wind like that.
Oh, yeah.
Which I found really uncomfortable for for a lot, like if I was winding a jumper's worth, just going, my wrist really, really aches now. Whereas this one, it's sort of a more, feels like, to me, it feels like a more natural motion. I mean, I'm sure others disagree, but because plenty of people buy the ones. And the other trouble I had was my same trouble I always have in this house is a flat surface to put it on. Because you need enough tabletop to sit something that big and clamp it in place, because of course you're moving it around, so you need something to stop it wobbling all over the place, whereas at least this I can put on the edge of a bookshelf. So.
The only thing I find with mine is that the yarn guide, the upright one at the back, it wiggles its way out.
Yeah, well, mine's now stuck out.
Oh.
It doesn't, because you should be able to, oh, there we go, I've loosened it. You can pull it as far out as you can to lock
Oh,
it.
mine doesn't do that.
Yeah.
My Chinese lock off, you have to kind of ram it into this little gap, and it gradually wiggles its way back up. And if you're not careful, it jumps off.
Yeah, because theoretically, like you can release it like that, and it means that it doesn't take up as much space. But yeah, as you pull it out, you sort of feel it locked in place. But yeah, this is a brother one. They're the sort of thing that pop up on like charity shops and randomly. In fact, mine's held together. I broke the plastic on the edge of it, so in the true manner of every single one of these I've ever encountered, it's got sellotape holding the plastic together. Because there's always some bit of plastic somewhere on some of them that are broken. The only thing I have had to do at one point in time was to take it apart because I had jammed yarn into and I couldn't get it out. So that's the one advantage that the nice flat wooden ones have got, is that they don't eat yarn in quite the same way. But yeah, I bought one thinking this will be lovely and beautiful, because it was loads of money, because at the time it was before Knit Pro made theirs, so the only option to buy was the shacked one, and just went, oh well, this is disappointing. So, because the other thing, I mean, at least with this one, you can also clamp it in different way round. So like sometimes I've clamped it onto a cupboard door and used it that way round compared to having it that way up. So it does sit in quite a lot of places. So yeah. I'd reached out one more thing, which Terry, you talked about the Bar Creative ones, which are made in the UK.
I love.
I'd reached out these, which were the original versions, which are the Aquaworks bobbins.
Oh yeah, they're much more.
Most people now know of, which they're basically breakdown bobbins, and I've got 6 of them for my shacked matchless, because bizarrely at the time it was cheaper to buy the Aquaworks breakdown ones than it was to buy the proper shacked ones from a retailer in the UK. Yeah, having to pay postage and the import costs. Because the shacked bobbins were so eye-wateringly expensive. And basically they're 3D printed ends, and you pick and choose the end that you get. At the other end on these ones is a locking motion, and it's got little ball bearings, but actually I think I've worn the holes of the ball bearings out with mine, because one of the things about this 3D printed plastic is sometimes it's not the hardest wearing. I've never had a problem with the ends popping off, even though I've lost some of the ball bearings on mine by now. The very, very first generation of Aquaworks ones I had, they hadn't made the groove deep enough for the double drive, and I got sent a replacement set free of charge, where they changed this groove back here to make it deep enough for the double drive to work properly. And they're really nice because they're really light. So and
they'll fit any wheel.
They make them for just about any wheel going. So the other option is, and I think Terry is being very kind and going to go and fetch one of hers. These are made by a company in the UK called Bar Creative, and it basically uses the same principle in that 3D printing things is really, really easy and cheap if you've already got a 3D printer and you know how to come up with the designs and shapes.
I have seen them, but I've always been a bit worried about whether they actually work very well.
They work brilliantly, but they don't have ball bearings in them.
No, the Bar Creative ones I think are on a screw thread, aren't they?
Yeah.
I had issues with one of the ones that I ordered in that the end didn't sit square on the shaft.
All right.
But I think they've then since worked on a jig to make sure that when the ends get glued onto the shaft, everything goes on square.
Yeah, I haven't ever had a problem. And I first bought some for my Ashford E spin. And then when I got my Wallmaker's Bliss, I thought, oh, I bet they don't make them for the Wallmaker's Bliss, but they do.
Yeah, because they're the same size as the ones that are used on the Shacked, oh no, sorry, not the Shack, the Lewitt S10, and also on the, what's the little Lewitt? I'm having a brain blank.
S10,
the folding one. The teeny tiny little
one.
Yeah, the teeny tiny little Lewitt that breaks down into
They come in a little bag like this with their little logo thing. So they're fabulous for storage because they break down, you know, into nothing. And then they send you also a tension band as well.
Yeah, just because
they advise that you don't use the plastic. It, like on my e-spinner, the tension band was this fishing wire.
Yeah, you know, it's the fine filament stuff.
Horrible.
Yeah, and it works really well, but it can particularly on the 3D printed plastics, because they're a little bit softer, you can end up sort of wearing a groove in them.
Yeah.
So you sort of generally need a softer brake band. I tend to replace all my brake bands with crochet cut cotton anyway.
Oh, do you? What, the perlé?
Yeah. Yeah, but I tend to put that on all of my wheels. Apart from the only one that hasn't actually is the Woolmaker's Bliss, but that's probably only because I've not worn it out or broke it yet. So because I've always got a thing of the fine crochet cotton lurking about the place. So, and it works. It just gives just enough grip, but not too much. So,
see, I'm curious because my husband's got a 3D printer.
Ooh.
So I'm curious. Yeah.
Well, if you hunt around on like the Thing Maker or the Makers, the place where there's the depositories of the open source files, there's already quite a lot of open source. Dawn says, what's the name of this company? They're called Bar Creative and they're on Etsy.
Yeah, BAA, one word, creative.
Yeah. And I say I ordered one and I did have an issue with it, and they'd made some changes to how they put the bobbins together, and sent me another one. I've ended up not using it actually, because by the time we got that sorted, I wasn't spinning that particular project anymore. But they're a good alternative if you don't want to be importing the Acrework ones into the
UK. That ones were a bit too expensive, more expensive. But I did also, Martine, I mean, there's loads on. I found another person on Etsy. I think she was in Germany actually, and she was making these bobbins, similar bobbins. She was just had a home printer and obviously downloaded a file to make a bobbins. When it came, it actually was useless. It was completely and utterly useless, and it took about 3 months for delivery. So
my husband's printed some almost as a replica of the wooden ones. So they don't break down, but they don't spin quite the same. They rattle a little bit.
Yeah,
they're not quite.
Probably the hole in the middle is just fractionally too big. If it's that, the hole down the middle has got to be big enough that it will spin freely, but not the rattling is because it can move backwards and forwards on the shaft itself. So it might be that if he prints another one and just reduces the size of that hole diameter by probably even 0.1 of a millimeter.
They won't need a lot.
No, because if you make it too small, they don't fit. Because when my dad's had a go at turning some bobbins, it's amazing how precise you have to be. I mean, I've gone at the wooden ones with a file to sort of go get it to the point where it fits just and is just large enough for a thin film of oil and no bigger. but yeah, the fact having ones that the ends can take off if you only live in a small house is an absolute godsend, because all of a sudden you've gone from something that you can and they stack up in a drawer so much more easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, so changing the ends so that they're like screw threaded. But I think there's quite a lot of files out there now that people have.
I'll set in the challenge.
Yeah, well, sort of thing that it's better that than making random
Star Trek and Star Wars figures.
Yeah, maybe something useful. But there was a person
spinning wheel.
There was a person on my summer school course a couple of years ago that I was teaching, and she'd designed and 3D printed her own bobbins. I think she'd found the original files on one of the file sharing sites and then made some slight modifications to increase the spokes, and like she'd also made some that are jumbo, because theoretically you can make these bobbins so that they basically fill the space in the flyer, because sometimes the bobbins that the manufacturers made are actually slightly smaller than technically you've got space for. You just need a little bit more on the ends, so you can actually make some modified and bigger size bobbins as well. But yeah, so bobbins, the breakdown bobbins are a nice thing to have, and a nice thing to ask people for as well, because you can sort of say, I've got this wheel, so, and I want this colour, or I want this spoke design. But they are nice, and particularly for spinning finer yarns, the difference it makes having a bobbin that weighs 20 grams versus one that weighs 60 grams is huge. It's so much easier. You end up with the yarn snapping so much less.
Because I've got a new flyer for my Kromsky since we've done the wheel one. They brought out a magnetic flyer for it, which means that it now sits in front of the upright instead of at the back. And I've got slider rings instead of the hooks, which means that when I spin with the locks, I'm not spending my entire life picking them off. And it came with a like a jump orifice bypass for doing so I can actually have more of a go at some of the art yarns on the course fun course. But yeah, it's brilliant. I'm really pleased. Lots of people said they didn't like the sliders. I think it was on one of the, it might have been the Kiwi, and they didn't like those slider rings. I'm getting on really well with them.
I struggled with Ashford sliding hook flyers have got those pinch and squeeze sliders.
You just push. I just have to push them.
I always struggled with yarn getting tangled in those unless it was held perfectly under tension. So like, if you stopped spinning and you then you sort of let some slack go into the system, even when you sort of wrapped it around the tension knob or something, when you came to pick it up, you go to start spinning and discover that just on the ends of one of the metal springs or something, the yarn had just snagged ever so slightly.
These ones are literally just a ring. So the arm on the flyer goes through that bit. There's a little gap, so you haven't got much leeway, and it really does just slide. I had to sand it a bit because my wheel's painted, so we put the paint on, and it was a bit of an effort, but with a bit of sanding, and I have to say I've got spares because I insisted on having the pink rings just because why not?
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, there's lots of nice things that beyond, once you've gone beyond a wheel, of sort of things that aren't essential, but by crikey, they make life easier. Has anybody else got any other tools of things and bits and pieces? I've exhausted my spare bits, but like there's tools to make hand-day and plying easy.
Oh, today I went to my local little spinning group because I've moved, and one of the ladies had this thing. Again, it was 3D printed, I presume, and it's got like a little ghost. She called it ghost, and it's to make an Andean plying bracelet. So it's like a bit of a rectangle thing with hooks and stuff around, a little ghost head on it, and you just hook it round, wind it round. And when she didn't demonstrate it exactly, but because she didn't have yarn, but she was explaining it, and I said, oh, so does it make a plying bracelet? And she said, yeah. never seen anything like that before. She got that off of Facebook.
Yeah, someone always comes to the door when I've just started on a applying bracelet.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen the ones that are almost like they almost sort of replicate your hand. They're sort of like a sort of.
Yeah, this was just like that.
Yeah.
Head here like this, and then it had, I don't know, bits here where you wound it round. She was sort of going, well, you go round and round and up and over, and you know, she was just demonstrating like that, really. And she said, and then it's amazing because you slip it off and you slip it over your hand. And I was like, oh, okay.
I know what one of those. I shall have to do some Googling. I'm in the middle of writing the gift guide for spinners for this year, and it's sort of half written, sort of sat in the background.
Where she got it from,
yeah, it's one of my jobs for tomorrow. So because that sounds like the sort of thing of just going, well, I might not have bought it for myself, but if somebody's bought it for me, then I'm going to give this a go, because this sounds.
I think you said it was £16, I think you said, and then you could get a bigger one that would make 100 grams. I don't know why you'd want to make 100 grams.
Crikey, that's a long time to be sort of attached to your wheel.
Yeah. But she was delighted because she didn't know how to make
find it on your hand. Yeah.
And
I didn't know such a thing existed till I did your course.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the sort of the paddle type ones for sort of that kind of have basically a paddle type shape with a stick poking up that you can use hold onto and use. I've definitely seen those before, but this one's like, that sounds a bit different of instead of it kind of needing to be something that you hold on a stick. So
yeah, I'll ask her where she got it from. She's on Facebook on a Spinning UK group.
There's quite a few people now who are sort of basically kind of doing stuff from their own homes, and they basically only post on various Facebook groups as a way of sort of kind of they just sell via Facebook, which is a bit annoying. You're not really a Facebook person.
I don't go on Facebook, so I'm
not a Facebook person either.
You can end up just going, I can't find anything.
Yeah. Which group is that?
Yeah. And you're going, how long ago was this post? Because the search function, well, that doesn't work either. Anyway, right. I'm going to suggest we call things to a halt today. I've had a really busy week. We are going on holiday next week, so I've been sort of doing that whole thing that everybody who's self-employed does, where you're basically trying to cram 2 weeks worth of work into 1 week.
Well, I'm really glad the Never Ending Gradient is coming out early, because I've actually just spun and hung to dry the last one. So I hadn't done any, and then I've started, because I'm doing a poncho and just taking the colours down, so I'll just keep going until it's long enough. And I've got about that much yarn left to knit, so
I've packed up 35 of the 52 this afternoon. So
I got my email to say mine was dispatched,
there's about another 15 or so left to be done, but they'll be able to be done tomorrow morning before the postman comes. So, and that's the last of the I have got to get done, as opposed to the it would be nice to get done. So, but yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. We shall do combs and carders next time, but I think it might be January rather than December, because December's just so busy with lots of things going on, and hopefully we're all going to get to see our families this year.
Oh, I hope so.
It'd be nice. I've got theatre tickets booked, which I am as of yet still not entirely certain how I feel about this.
In London, to go to London?
Yeah, I'm not.
No.
Yeah, sort of going, I don't know if
I really wanted to see the Bond film. I've always seen the Bond films at the cinema, and I wasn't ready. We discovered there was a drive-in one near here, so it's the first time I've been to the cinema with my dog.
Well, I wanted to go and see this play because it's The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. I'm going to hit pause because I'm fairly certain nobody else needs to. People will